Hey everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today on my presentation of Putting Grief in Your Pocket, the 8 stages of growing through grief. I'm so happy that you've decided to join me, and I just hope that you can have a listen, and then at the end, if there's still some people here to visit with, we will talk about the ways that we can use these stages to grow. In case you don't know me, I'm Karen Camerato. I am the founder of Rising Above in Memory of. I am a grief coach and a mom of 3, 2 here on earth and 1 in heaven. The 3 key factors that helped in my healing was that I was able to tell my story over and over, have and express gratitude, and being able to find things to be grateful for in the midst of so much sadness. And the third thing, and the thing that I'm focusing on today, which is taking action in memory of your child. So why did I call this workshop Putting Grief in Your Pocket? And the reason I did that was a story that I'd heard that I was reminded of, and it just resonated with me so much in regards to the process of grief. And so I'm just going to read you the story. This was written by Jessica Watson. She is a blogger. The name of her blog is 4 Plus an Angel, and this is a really, really poignant way of understanding. The best way I can describe grieving over a child as the years go by is to say that it's similar to carrying a stone in your pocket. When you walk, the stone brushes against your skin. You feel it. You always feel it. But depending on the way you stand or the way your body moves, the smooth edges might barely graze your body. Sometimes you lean the wrong way or you turn too quickly and a sharp edge pokes you. Your eyes water and you rub your wound, but you have yet to keep going because not everyone knows about your stone, or if they do, they don't realize that it can still bring this much pain. There are days when you're simply happy now. Smiling comes easy and you laugh without thinking. You slap your leg during the laughter and you feel the stone and you aren't sure whether you should be laughing still. The stone still hurts. Once in a while, you can't take your hand off that stone. You run it over your fingers and roll it in your palm, and you're so preoccupied by its weight, you forget things like your car keys and your home address. You try to leave it alone, but you just can't. You want to take a nap, but it's been so many years since you've called in sad, you're not sure anyone would understand anymore if they ever did. But most days you can take your hand out of your pocket, feel your stone, and even smile at its unwavering presence. You've accepted this stone as your own, crossing your hands over it, saying, "Mine," as children do. You rest more peacefully than you once did. You've learned to move forward the best you can. Some days you want to show the world what a beautiful memory you're holding. But most days you twirl it through your fingers, smile, and look at the sky. You squeeze your hands together and hope you're living in a way that honors the missing piece you carry until your arms are full again. So as I begin to talk about this process of growing through grief, my main thing that I want to ask you is to just please keep your mind open. On any given day, I can go into a Facebook group of grieving mothers and find a post that says something like, "It's been 6 weeks since I lost my child. Please tell me it gets better." A plea from a new mom new to this journey. And I'm always shocked by the replies. "No, it never gets better." "It doesn't get better, but it changes." "I lost my child 10 years ago and it only gets worse." Of course, there's going to be some who say it gets softer, and after time it won't be so raw. I sometimes think that a mom who's lost a child feels that by admitting that it gets better, they're giving up on their child. Well, I don't feel that way. Whenever I see these posts, I take it as my responsibility to give that mom hope. Yes, it gets better. It takes work on your part, but it can get better. I'm now experiencing joy and fulfillment and a love for life that I never thought was going to be possible. And sometimes the responses are brutal. People say, well, that must be nice, or, well, I'm never going to feel that way, or as long as I accept it, as long as I live, I will never accept it. And sitting here today, you may be watching and wondering, will I always feel this way? Or you may be the one saying, I'll never feel joy again. So I ask you, please just keep your mind open. Keep your mind and your heart open to the possibility that you can heal and grow through grief. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my story. Like you, I've lost a child. My firstborn, Nicholas, was the light of my life. And like so many children who leave us too soon, he was special. He was funny, happy, loving, smart, kind. The list goes on and on. I'm sure you can relate. He was a special kid. One January morning, there was some snow and freezing temperatures where we live in South Carolina, and school was canceled and daycare was closed. When Nick got dressed to go play with the neighborhood kids, he was so excited because he was going to play with his new hockey stick that he had gotten for Christmas that year. His baby sister and I stayed warm and cuddly inside when he went out to play. After about an hour, there was a loud banging at my door, and one of his friends was telling me that Nick had fallen in the pond. And on that terrible day, my special 8-year-old son had tried to help his friend who'd fallen through the ice of our small neighborhood pond. When he crawled out on the ice to offer his hand, the ice beneath him broke, and both boys died that day. And I've decided that whenever I tell the story of that day, I'm going to ask everyone to just stop for a minute and think about their child so that I can take a moment to think about Nick. I realized somewhere along the way that I was getting very mechanical telling my story because I had told it so many times, and I never wanted to feel that way. So can we just take just a minute? I want you to think about your child and the things that you loved about them. Please know that my heart goes out to each and every one of you that are watching. Thank you for letting me do that. I think that all moms, whether they've lost a child or not, appreciate taking a minute to think about how much they love their kids. That was almost 24 years ago, and I'm sure you've heard the saying that time heals all wounds. And you may have learned the hard way that for a grieving mother, that's not true. Only that grieving mother has the power to heal her wounds. There's not a book, a therapist, there's not a loved one, no one person or thing that can heal the wounds of your loss. Your healing must come from inside of you. It requires more than just waiting, it requires action. I will tell you that I didn't take action for a very long time. I covered myself in numbness and I went on with life, doing what was expected of me, working and taking care of my daughter Brooke and son Colin, who came along about 1.5 years after Nick died. I saw a therapist early on, and I think that may be how I was able to get to the numbness stage. Don't get me wrong, she was a great help, and without her, I don't think I would have been able to function on a very basic level, like going to work and taking care of the kids. In 1996, when Nick died, the internet wasn't really a thing, so I did seek answers. I really think the most common thing for a mom who has just lost a child wants to know is, what do I need to do to make this pain stop? And that was me. I got books on the topic of grief and child loss. I voraciously read stories of other moms and what had happened to their child. I was desperate to find some kind of similarity that could offer me a what to expect when you've lost a child guide, like when I read What to Expect When You're Expecting when I was pregnant. I read all I could find on the subject, and to a certain extent, I guess that it did help. I also attended a meeting of the Compassionate Friends, but to be fair, I think it was too soon, and I just wasn't ready to be in the midst of so many other people's pain. And I also didn't want to leave my children in the evenings to attend. One well-known book that I read, and I think most people who are grieving know about, is On Death and Dying by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, where she talks about the stages of grief. I think we all look at the stages as a checklist of what's going to happen to us next, but I'm sure you found out by now that that's not how it works at all. Looking back on it, I realized that these stages, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, are more like common emotions many grievers feel. And again, I think it's helpful to know about this, but it's what's happening to you, the emotions that are overcoming you. A lot has happened in my life since Nick died 24 years ago, but it's only in about the last 5 or 6 that I started seeking knowledge, seeking new thought patterns, seeking a new way to live in the world. So you can see that it definitely didn't happen overnight, but it did not have to take 24 years. After making changes to my life, I decided I was finally ready to do something in honor of my Nick. I took a course and became a grief coach, and now I work exclusively with moms like us to not only help them through the early days of grief, but also to help them find meaning. Sorry, I lost my place. To find the meaning and personal growth, and yes, even the happiness that I finally found. As I began working with these moms and interacting with so many of them every day, I was educating myself on how to help the grieving. I circled back around to the concepts that were around when I became a griever, but what I was looking for were more actions that someone could take to grow through grief. I couldn't really find what I was looking for, so I started collecting notes about the actions that other moms had taken, the ones who wanted to grow, who were trying to grow, and had found ways to honor their children and ways to put meaning back into their lives. So it was through this research that I created the 8 stages of growing through grief. And just like the stages of grief itself, the stages of growth don't necessarily happen in a certain order, and they aren't all mandatory in order to grow. As I read through them, please remember that the examples given in each stage may not apply to you. You will figure out what works in each stage for the unique you that you are. Number 1 is allow. And I do believe that this is the first stage and that you'll come back to it many times. But this is the stage where you have very little control over what you're able to do. It's almost as if an alien has taken over your body and you aren't able to do the things you're telling it to do. During this stage, you must allow your feelings to determine your actions rather than the other way around. Allow crying, allow sadness, anger, desire to sleep, desire to stay home. When these emotions are knocking at your door, you need to allow them or they will cause bigger problems down the road. The main point of this stage of growth is to allow yourself to feel and do what you're able to do, both physically and emotionally. The second stage is tend. During this stage, you must tend to yourself and your needs. Be nice to yourself and find ways to practice self-care, self-love, and self-preservation. This includes getting plenty of rest, drinking water, spa treatments, walks in nature, and seeking the help of a grief professional if necessary. The third is process. In this stage, you're processing your loss, moving from shock and denial into the reality of what's happened. During that time, you're learning details about the death, looking through photos and memorabilia, sharing memories with friends and family, and talking about your loss. Next comes educate. Here, you learn everything you can about child loss, grief, major life changes, and coping skills. Examples are reading books, visiting websites, listening to podcasts, watching documentaries, and attending seminars and retreats. Next is connect. As A part of this stage, you're identifying the connections that feed your soul. True friends, loving family, church, and support groups. You may need to actively reach out to initiate and maintain these connections, because although there are people who want to help, they are afraid to upset or hurt you, and they just don't know what to say or do. Next is seek. When seeking, we will be looking internally and externally for our own personal answers and desires for what we want the rest of our life to look like. This is the perfect time to ask yourself, what would my child want me to do? Next is decide. I believe this is the only mandatory step of growing through grief. It isn't easy, and some never reach this stage. But when you do, it has a direct effect on the quality of the rest of your life. This is when you decide to improve your situation. You decide who you want to be now, whether it's a modified version of your old self or a completely new person. That's up to you. And finally, number 8, the final stage is act. Now that you've decided, it's time to take action. You take a step, you plan, you go to the gym, you sign up for the class, you volunteer at the animal shelter, you pick up the hobby, you go out with your friends, you start a business, you change jobs, you take a trip, you start the charity, you make that move. Whatever it is, the simple act of acting on your plan in one area can have a domino effect on your life and what it can become. I know this isn't a simple solution, and I know that deciding to grow through your grief is really scary. You may feel that in some way you're betraying your child by making this decision. But at the end of the day, we all have to decide what is the best way to honor our child's life. And this is my favorite quote. I think it sums up perfectly what I'm trying to say here. And it's by Elizabeth Gilbert. And she says, I beg people who are suffering from loss to be brave enough to ask this question. What is the life that you can only have without that person? What is the life I can live now doing things I never would have done because we would have gone in a different direction? I want to have the courage and the curiosity and the creativity to go figure out what that life is. I don't see it as a betrayal. I see it as continuing the really huge life-affirming spirit that she brought to me in the world. So as you move forward in your life, I encourage you to truly ask yourself this question: what can you do now? I really appreciate you joining me for this. I have a worksheet that can go along with this, and the worksheet part of this process is where we will go through each of the 8 stages, and we will come up with ideas of ways that you can allow, tend, process, educate, connect, seek, decide, and finally act. I thank you so much for being here, and I'm just going to check and make sure that nobody's here right now. Just want to make sure. Stop and share, and I think not. So anyway, thank you so much, and if you have any questions or any comments, please let me know. Thank you.